Hey, Rachel, welcome to the show.
Hi, Britt. How are you today?
I am doing awesome. How are
Good.
you?
I'm doing great as well. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, where are you calling in from?
I am calling in from a little town outside of Waterloo, which is also a little town outside of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. So,
Canada.
enjoying the nice country landscape. I moved to a new house recently. So,
Awesome. We love our Canadians. We have a lot of Canadian listeners. We love y'all.
and we love y'all right back.
That's great. We are so excited to hear your story today. We had a phone call and I just knew we had to get your story on record because it is a powerful one. And I think it is a story that needs to be told. And this is a great platform to talk about all the details that many platforms do not, provide space for.
Most
Um,
definitely.
so as we get started here, our listeners love to learn about the background of our guests, right? We usually don't say we want to grow up and be in FemTech. Somehow we landed up here. So
Most
tell us the story. Tell us about Rachel. Where are you from? What did you study? What did you do? And then how did you end up here?
Yeah, for sure. So I am born and raised in a small town called Waterloo. We are about an hour outside of Toronto, and it is we call it the barn raising community. And so what that aspect really entails is we have a lot of Mennonites in our area, and part of how they get things done is they work together as a community. And that ultimately sprung into this like amazing tech community that has been developed here. We're called the Silicon Valley of the North, which is really interesting. And so a little more Canadian than your Silicon Valley, a little less aggressive, I would say, but we
Yeah, a
are,
little nicer.
yeah, a little nicer. But yeah, we have this really old school mentality of just helping the community out and coming together. And this has created kind of this really awesome infrastructure for innovation and entrepreneurs and that kind of thing. So I, like everyone, wants to get away from home. So I went to Toronto for school. I did some undergrad work in business and then went straight into my master's back at University of Waterloo. It's one of the most renowned engineering schools, most definitely in Canada and possibly across North America. And so I got a master's of business entrepreneurship and technology. And
Cool.
so I wanted to do something a little different than an MBA. I wanted to do something hands-on. And in that process, you are supposed to start a startup. And so first day of school, you're told you have 15 minutes to come up with an idea. The ideas were hilarious. My idea was hilarious, but it morphed into a 5-year-long excursion into the world of entrepreneurship. I started a company called The Mod Market, not femtech related. It was
Okay.
an automotive augmented reality e-commerce system. I got to an exit with that after lots of mess ups. I actually give like a stand-up comedy routine about how much I messed up and how not to mess up like I did.
Dude, that's an awesome event. We should
Yeah.
do that. That's amazing.
For sure, for sure. So, got that experience hands-on as an entrepreneur. I worked a little bit in innovation teams for financial institutions. I've worked in the incubator and accelerator community. So I actually worked with a local university, Wilfrid Laurier University, starting up their incubator. And I kind of got my toes dipped in a little bit of everything. I wanted to try out supporting entrepreneurs to being an entrepreneur to all the other ways, like intrapreneur, which is, working in a corporate institution. So I wanted to try it all out, but my heart always ends up back at starting a company. So
Mhm.
here we are.
Yes. Once you get bitten by that bug, it's hard.
Exactly.
I'm
Yep.
totally screwed. I can never have a boss ever again. I'm
It's
totally.
true. It's so true. Most definitely. Yeah.
So, now you are leading this company called Hyivy. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about the company and then why did you start it?
Yeah, so working in the incubator, I did that for a year as kind of a pause in between selling the first company and going into the second one, which I didn't anticipate doing. I had worked a year in the incubator, took a pause and said I wanted to kind of reframe my mind, think about what I wanted to do next. And 2 weeks after giving my notice, I got a cancer diagnosis. So I was like, I guess I know what I'm doing for the next year.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, throws you for a little bit of a loop. I'm not going to lie. And yeah, that was my focus over the past year. And that situation just, it's something that you don't plan for. It's something that came out of left field for me. I was a little bit angry because I did all the right things. I did my pap smears. I did absolutely everything. I'm super conscious of my health. I went to the doctor religiously, and how come I ended up with this thing? And so I had a pap smear about a year before, wasn't really sexually active. And it's a funny story. I actually had a Tinder hookup, like one night stand. And I was like, I need to get laid. Like I need to have sex right now.
Yes.
And
so wellness, girl. It's a wellness important factor. Yes.
Exactly. And so, a year and a half later, I have this one night stand, and it was not pretty. Let's just say that as much. Yeah. And cervical cancer tumors, especially if they are right there, they can be quite aggressive. And so there was a lot of blood. And I was like, okay, this probably isn't my period.
Yeah.
And, I think it's important to kind of highlight this stuff because it can happen to anyone.
Yes.
It can be disguised as so many different things. And, I like to say it as raw as it is, how I found it and what other women can be aware of. And so, yeah, this thing kept bleeding and bleeding, and I'm like, something's not right. Like I had my period. It was very regular, so I don't normally get this little in between.
Dude, one night stand from Tinder like saved your life then, huh?
Oh, like you should hear the jokes my gynecologist and me make. It's like, I owe that guy my life, even though I don't like him at all, and he is history.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Wow.
Hilarious.
Tinder can save your life, ladies. Maybe. Yes. Sometimes.
Yes, sometimes. There is a lot of ugly, but there is some beautiful things that can come out of it. That's for sure. So yeah, I go, about a week or two later to the doctor. I'm opened up. I'm there. I am getting an examination. He opens me up and he's like, oh my goodness. And he runs out of the office and comes back.
Never good when your legs are open and that's happening. Oh my God.
Yes. So he runs out, grabs the nurses and another doctor. They come in and they're all kind of peeking in there. And I'm like, what's going on down there?
Yeah, what's in there?
And so he says, okay, there's something here. This is an emergency. We need to get you into a gynecologist right away. And, I leave the office going like, what the hell is going on? I have no idea. And it was crazy because they really didn't give me any information. And any of my ladies listening who have went through this process, it's like the craziest process ever. They give you like little bits and pieces of information because they don't want you to panic and like call their office every 2 seconds in a panic. But it's also like so hard to mentally prepare for what's about to come because you're going through this ride. And so I get to the gynecologist's office like the next week. I am in Canada, so things are a little different than the US.
Oh God, yeah.
We have free healthcare. So, and I did actually move through the healthcare system quite quickly. So they were very quick to respond, which was great. But, I went to my gynecologist and they didn't even tell me what was happening until I got into the office and I saw the nurse before and I read on her screen as she's doing like the kind of preparation to get me into the doctor.
Yeah.
I think at that time it was a 2-centimeter tumor. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? They put me back out into the waiting room and my mom's there with me. And I'm like, Mom, like there's actually like, it's saying there's a tumor in my notes, but they didn't tell me that at the doctor's office.
By the way, how old were you at the time?
28.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was a little bit of like, a rattling situation.
Ah.
Gynecologist looks and she says, I think we have a serious situation here. And next thing you know, I am right through biopsy, right through x-rays, ultrasound, CT, MRI, PET scan, all the way to the oncologist. And my tumor grew from the moment we started from 2 centimeters to 4 centimeters within a month.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So it was a ride. And so
Yeah.
I was very quick to jump on the operating table. Luckily I was stage 1, but I was a later stage 1. So I was right on the cusp of not being able to get surgery, but actually having to go in and get radiation and chemo first.
Yeah.
So luckily they were able to do radical hysterectomy on me, as well as a pelvic lymphodectomy. I think I always say that word wrong, but they took my fallopian tubes, my uterus, my cervix, half of my vagina, transposed my ovaries so that potentially if I had to get radiation, they wouldn't get radiated on. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. But, healing through my process of going through that hysterectomy and, losing the chance of fertility, which was a huge hit for me at 28. You're on bed rest. I always say my body was shut down, but my brain was going 100 miles per hour laying in bed. And I had connected with these women on Facebook. Honestly, these Facebook groups for gynecological cancers, if anyone's listening, join them. They are the best place to be. The women are so insanely helpful. They're so compassionate. They have really great rules in place to make sure that sensitive materials don't get through, and that level of sensitivity is there. And I saw this common theme of women just talking about their aftercare after a pelvic-based cancer, especially gynecological cancers, and this pattern of, what the heck is a dilator? What the heck is pelvic floor therapy? I haven't had sex in 18 years since my surgeries or my radiation treatments. I'm completely sewn and shut. I don't know what to do. And I saw these reoccurring patterns. And
Yes.
I'm no stranger to pelvic health problems. I actually had Bartholomew's gland cyst in the past, had a surgery there where I felt everything. That was my first learning of not knowing that I can actually can't take freezing. So I had a little bit of PTSD from that, developed some pretty significant pelvic floor issues, saw a pelvic floor therapist and used the dilators and the whole 9 yards, and kind of learned that, okay, 15 years later, nothing has changed.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So I was like, okay, there's something here. I'm an innovator. I'm a problem solver. I can tackle this. And so kind of, put a couple probing questions out there on the Facebook groups, got some information together, did some secondary research on my end. And when I started my radiation, September 1st of last year, so I'm just coming up to almost my ending 1 year, but so I'm still in it. But I had started my radiation treatments. And with radiation, you're in the hospital every day. It's a full-time job. And I was like, okay, I have this like medical thing I'm thinking about doing. There's tons of doctors around. I'm going to force them to listen to me.
Oh my God. You're an entrepreneur in the oncology center.
Yeah. So I'm laying in the radiation machine. They're like trying to align my, you get radiation tattoos aligned with the laser beams for the radiation machine. And I'm like, hey, I have this business idea and blah, 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 blah. And you can't leave my side because you're setting me up for radiation. So you have to listen to me.
I really like you.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. So it was a great kind of chance to get that medical validation I needed, that they were looking for something. They didn't know how to direct women the right ways other than these kind of 2 standards of care, which is dilators, which everybody hates. They suck. And the other, path being pelvic floor therapy, which is slowly getting adopted, but we still have a long way to go. And, a lot of women are kind of uncomfortable with the fact that somebody else is just in there and digging around. So
yeah, can we actually talk about that for a second? So,
yeah.
We've talked about dilators in the past, but not in great detail. So can you just tell our listeners real quick, like if they have no idea what image should come into their head, what do you mean by dilator?
Most definitely. So I will try to say it as straightforward as possible.
Yeah,
They are, they are, I would say, very straight, very cold, very plastic sticks on a handle. They are cylinders. They are shaped kind of like a very straight penis. And I call them like Russian dolls. You twist them off and off comes the larger piece to a smaller piece, and they get smaller and smaller down. What they are meant to do is break down scar tissue, stretch out the muscles, all the things that happen from, menopausal problems to, radiation to surgeries, anything that can kind of affect the vaginal canal or vaginal vault.
Yeah, so it's for the vagina, right?
Exactly.
It's not like for rubbing anywhere else. It's like for inserting into the vagina to break up scar tissue, which if anyone has broken up scar tissue, it's a horrible experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
Most definitely. Yeah. And they even have them anally as well. So if you go through radiation for colorectal, any sort of pelvic based cancers, you deal with incontinence, you deal with that kind of smoothing out of your bowel lining, as well as your bladder lining, and then also the vaginal vault. So lots of scar tissue problems that come along with radiation.
All right. So that's the dilator part. And then when we say pelvic floor therapy, let's say I have an appointment with my pelvic floor therapist, what should I expect?
So my experience was an interesting one. When I first started, it was very clinical and very, rigid, and they want to start out that way. And it's going to feel very cold almost. And part of that is just, it's such a sensitive area and it needs to be treated with care. And the practitioners know that. And so what they do is they go through your whole history. They get an understanding of what's happened. They get an understanding of the symptoms that you're experiencing. And then they do a very, very gentle examination of your pelvic floor from the inside. So they will actually go both vaginally as well as rectally and examine all of your muscles, examine all of the tissue, any of the inconsistencies that happen there. And what they will do is eventually, once you've actually went through the assessment, they will understand exactly what condition you're in and how they could start to solve some of the issues. And it's interesting because my new pelvic floor therapist I'm working with now, she actually looks at the pelvis from like the knees all the way up to the breasts.
Wow.
So she's looking at everything. She's looking at inside, she's looking at outside. So it's a lot of combination, especially if you've had surgery or radiation. There's scar tissue everywhere. And so she looks at breaking down and loosening up the scar tissue as a gentle massage on the outside, all around the pubic bones areas, the hip bones. And then she works very gently inside in the vaginal vault into the kind of the crevices that you can't get at from the outside. And it is quite the experience because she's able to get muscles that have never been touched before.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of like, whoo, what was that? And, ooh, that's a feeling I've never felt before.
What an intimate, experience.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, regardless of how mannerly your pelvic floor therapist is, I mean, if you're a woman who, is a little shy or, I talk about vulvas all day. So like spreading the legs, it's not as big of a thing, but I am a woman who is a survivor of sexual trauma. And like, so for me, it would be very intense about who that person was, what they look like, what did they sound like,
Exactly.
I didn't realize how intense this was.
Yeah. And that's why we see a massive drop off rate. I mean, women are told to use these things. These are the 2 standards of care, especially for more of the significant diseases. And even as much as gender reassignment surgeries, these are women who are going through really traumatic situations. And now you're being told that you have to spend up to $5,000 for a pelvic floor therapist, just to get anywhere to even potentially think about having sex naturally again, or use dilators, which massive fall-off rates. Half the people don't know how to use them properly. I was told like on a little check box, are you using dilators? Yes or no? And it's like, nobody told me how to use them. Luckily, I went through it before in the past, so I knew about it. But poor women who have to go through this completely different standards of care, and half the doctors, have one perception where it's just like, go off, do your thing, you'll figure it out. And the other half are actually semi-proactive with it. But it's interesting, when I was going through that validation with doctors, they even admitted themselves that they're part of the problem. They don't know how to properly guide women. They don't know how to properly set them up for success. Part of that has to do with the lack of research. Part of that has to do with schools of thought in the way that they were taught. And we all know that the old school thought process really didn't keep women in mind. And so if I go to the doctor, I'm going to get a very different standard of care than if you go to the doctor. And this is a huge issue. It's a big problem. We have no data backing up the success of any of this stuff. Wow. It's kind of just became standard of care. Luckily, pelvic floor therapists are changing this, and we really look at them at Hyivy as a partner rather than a competitor, because we need our girls to keep going, and we need some better alternatives than what's currently being offered.
Yeah. And I mean, their hands are literally in it. And so like, I hope they have some sense of what they're doing and
exactly
progress, and like, they're not just figuring it out while they're in your rectum, right? Like hopefully they have some like protocols and
100%.
Yeah.
They're well trained. They're well trained. But it is new, right? And so in France, this is something that is actually mandatory. If you've had a baby, you're given by the government over in France 20 sessions comped by the government to go through pelvic floor therapy. But then you have places like Japan that don't even use tampons, and these types of things don't even exist. So North America sits kind of in the middle of the spectrum. We're still learning about this stuff, but we haven't quite fully adopted it just yet.
Yeah. And America, at least the United States, let me be more specific and not be too American by saying America, United States. Unfortunately, we have a large population of people who don't believe science. So yeah, we are still, still working on that. We're still working on it.
Yeah. Let's not go through the whole COVID situation stuff now too. But,
oh my gosh. So what is Hyivy then?
Yeah. So learning about all of this, learning about kind of my experience. And initially I had started out focusing on hysterectomies, hence the high in Hyivy. Okay. I realized that a lot of the symptoms I was experiencing from cancer, both radiation and going through a surgery, that's, hysterectomies are pretty well-known surgeries and pretty regular. I realized these symptoms were very similar across very different diagnoses. So, and a lot of the times these diagnoses compound over top of each other. So with radiation, at 28, I was in full-blown menopause, and oh boy, going into a hot flash for the first time was an interesting experience. But, I deal with incontinence, and I know that as I started to talk to more people in different areas of diagnoses, this is similar across PCOS, endometriosis, all the way into postpartum complications. There's prolapse. All these things develop things like scar tissue and changes to your physical structure, changes in your lubrication levels, changes in the way that you can control your muscles. And unfortunately, a lot of the products that are out there, so not even just the standards of care in terms of the dilators and pelvic floor therapy we've talked about, but Kegel exercisers and some of these other tools, they're just not going to cut it for us poor girls who can barely, get a dilator in or do a Kegel because there's so many other things going on. And so what we wanted to do was really approach this from a holistic standpoint, knowing that, most likely if you have incontinence, you probably have, some muscle control issues. If you have lubrication issues, you probably have some healthy tissue problems, right? And so we came at this at developing kind of an overall medical approach for our product development, focusing on the 5 vital signs of the pelvic floor. So looking at sensation, both pleasure and pain, looking at lubrication levels, so healthy discharge all the way to menstruation and infection. Healthy tissues, so looking at scar tissue to your regular good old healthy tissues, muscle control and response, and then looking at incontinence from both a bowel and bladder. I think we all forget that the bowel has just as much incontinence as the bladder can have as well. Yeah. And so what we wanted to do was create a product that kind of served a lot of those different functions in combination with some data, which has been really, really exciting. So we created a IoT platform. So first is the therapeutic vaginal wand. And what it is it's modular and customized to your own specific needs. So we work with women who deal with menopause all the way to cancers, gender reassignment surgeries, to twist and click on different modules that work best for their specific symptoms.
And Rachel, real quick, we have a lot of listeners that are not entrepreneurs. We have farmers, we have everyone on here. What do you mean by IoT?
Yeah.
What do you mean by modular? So I'm thinking in my mind, vaginal wand, it's customizable, but tell me why did you call it IoT and what's modular mean?
Yeah, so IoT really focuses on the Internet of Things. So what we're trying to do is not just provide a therapeutic device, we also want to provide a device that has data elements to it and is able to take that data and share it, with yourself to showcase your progress, which nobody has really delved into yet. And partially the reason why we're at where we're at is because we don't have access to this data. But then go as far as sharing it with your doctors to be able to say, here's what's happening with me. Give me the proper treatment plans, what's working, what's not, and let's make adaptive changes to that. So that's what I mean when I say IoT. And then going into the modularity side of things, we wanted to make it so that you can customize this device for you. So when we say modular, we actually have all these different components and pieces of the device that actually can detach from themselves and be built on top of each other to be able to provide certain forms of therapy as well as data collection. So what we're doing is, and some of these modules are things like hot and cold contrast therapy. So we can actually go from hot to cold, cold to hot, and back again. And it's interesting. We actually did a lot of testing through some very interesting ways. I was a part of this testing myself and found out quite a lot of really interesting things in that process. And so hot and cold really has that ability to penetrate beyond just the tissue. It actually goes into the surrounding organs and feels a lot better. I know I got at least a day's worth of alleviation of symptoms from my radiation cystitis just from using that cold therapy. So
I mean, it makes sense, right? If you're doing muscle therapy and you put an ice pack on it or a heating pad, it makes sense. But like, how the heck do you put an ice pack up your vagina?
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So hot and cold therapy is one that is in combination with temperature sensors. We actually found out that our disease populations sit at higher intravaginal temperatures than our normal population.
What does that mean?
Yeah, so within the vagina, so our normal ladies who aren't experiencing any issues sit at a temperature of around 36 degrees up to 37.5 when they're menstruating and ovulating. For some reason, us ladies who are dealing with some complications are actually sitting at, so I was sitting at 37.7 and higher, and we saw all the way up to 39.
Wow.
Yeah, so something's going on in there, and we're trying to figure out what that could indicate. And so that's looking at things like, is that an inflammatory response? Is that a hormonal change? Is that a marker that something's going on down there, right? And so we dove into that a little bit. We've been looking at, so we provide also self-lubrication. So what we do is we have these little pods that go into the device and give a dosage of lubrication based on the moisture levels within the canal. So what we're looking at is what is the optimal arousal state of lubrication, and making sure you constantly have that, especially for our menopausal women out there. And making sure that you're well lubricated so that we don't have tears, we don't have friction and pain.
This sounds like a vagina fairy godmother.
Yeah.
Like she just goes in there and she's like, all right,
Exactly.
girl, I'm gonna assess you all, and then I'm gonna provide you what you need.
Exactly.
Whoa.
And that's the beauty of sensors, right? And I think that's one of the things that this whole area has missed. We've started introducing pressure and force sensors, but what we've missed is just sticking some sensors up our hoo-ha and realizing that there's so much that can be told to us by these simple sensors and that kind of thing. So
and once again, you are actually following the FemTech trend. If you're listening right now, if you've listened in the past, you continue to hear this. We know that, temperature inside the vagina probably makes a difference. The lubrication probably makes a difference. But when we try to look at the graphs, the data, the research, we realize nobody's done it. And so you are similar to other FemTech founders where you're saying, we know it's important. And not only are we a startup creating a business with unit economics, but we're also researchers. We're empowering this. We're doing the science ourselves. We're discovering it.
Exactly. And that was the thing that transformed us from a therapeutic device company to a data company. Obviously, we want to provide women with this device as soon and as quickly as possible. I didn't even highlight, we have autodilators that are looking at different, dilating at different sizes, because we actually found out that the pelvic floor pushes our floor to be flat. So our vaginas are actually relatively flat in the very kind of first third of our vagina. And why has everything been created like a cylinder? Well, everybody creates products, as they know, after a penis. But yet us girls can't fit a penis in there because we have scar tissue and all these things going on. And so,
oh my God. So what, should it look like a tape, like a ruler? Like it should go in flat that way?
Yeah. So what we actually did was created a handle that rests on the pubic bone, so that you don't have to reach down and do all these crazy yoga poses, but also be able to pass through the high pressure zone of the pelvic floor, which a lot of women complain when they stick something up there, it shoots right back out. And that's because we have this band of muscle over our pelvic floor that is just pressurizing everything.
Yeah.
So we wanted to make sure that it was flat to fit those ergonomics. It was long enough to be able to reach all the way to the back of the canal, and hook in so that we can actually keep it in there, keep it comfortable, and be able to get past some of these major problems.
But just the physics of the vagina is so interesting to me.
It is.
Because as you talked about, that first part of the vagina has pressure, so things pop out. I'm imagining every time I put something in my vagina, you have to get past that part. Like if you're putting a tampon in, you have to get past that part of pressure for it to stay in there. Which is I've, hundreds of times in my life, but I've never really thought about it.
Exactly. And that's the thing, I didn't either until we started to do all this crazy testing. We were doing testing with balloons and all sorts of different stuff. And we found this stuff out where it's why has everything been created with this standard in mind? Well, it's male driven, right?
Yeah.
It's male driven to create products so that it can satisfy men. And I hate to say that, but that's the way it is. Yeah. And a lot of us just can't even consider sex, let alone interacting with a penis, with our vagina in any sort of way. We just want to get back to being able to have an exam comfortably by our doctors, right? Yes. So, but that really led to that data element, and that data element for us, my ultimate goal with this company is to open source this data to researchers so that we can actually start giving people quantifiable data points on incontinence and lubrication levels, and specifically on the disease population where a lot of medical research and a lot of funding goes into to figure out all these things, how this can actually impact the baseline of research and start to make some progress here. Like, let's.
So I am blown away. I'm like, how much are you raising? What's your term? I want to invest. This is so for real. It reminds me a lot of Lioness. We just had this a few weeks ago. They just opened their open source research for orgasms, right? Because they have IoT, Internet of Things vibrator that can measure orgasms. And so they're like, hey, sex researchers, you want to see a database of 60,000 and growing orgasms? Like, here you go. Tell us what you find.
Exactly. And I absolutely adore Lioness. They messaged us on Instagram and I'm like, oh my God, I'm a huge fangirl.
That's how I felt too. I was like, girl, you please me a lot. I love you.
I know, right? But I know some of the stuff they've been able to find out, like the effect of concussions on orgasms. And it was from one of their users that just had said like, hey, nothing's working for me. And then they dove into it and found that it was like a concussion that spurred that on. Like, this is the type of stuff we have no idea about. And like, why the heck do we not know these things? We are half the world's population. Like, let's figure this out, people.
Yep. Oh my gosh. Crazy. So where are you at with the company? A lot of our listeners, they want to buy the product if it's available, or they want to know, like, when can they expect this? So give us a sense of where you're at right now and like, what is the near term goals?
Yeah, so we have, we're just in the process of filing our patents and getting this product kind of secured up so that we can actually start to promote this. If you go on our website, hyivy.com, you will see that there's not a lot of information out there, but that's partially too because we've been a little bit hush-hush, but starting to open up about what we're working on now. And so what our goal is over the next little bit, we are trying to make a decision in the very, very short term. So within the next week or two of if we will be going down the medical device route, which is ultimately the route that allows us to leverage this data in a medical sense. But unfortunately doesn't allow us to get this product to market quick, which ultimately for me as a consumer and selfishly creating this company for my own purposes, I want to get this out in women's hands, collect this data, and figure out how we can then go into the medical market. So selling to consumers, we are hoping to get this product kind of through pre-sale towards summer of next year. So we will be ramping up all of our user testing and clinical testing in the next month. So we have a little spot on our website on the top banner that says sign up now. If you are a woman who's experiencing any pelvic floor issues, this could be, or pelvic health issues rather, this could be vulvodynia, vaginismus, to postpartum issues, to cancer, to gender reassignment surgeries, please contact us. We are looking for people to participate. You will not be thrown right into testing. We're going to do lots of surveys and interviews with you, understand your conditions so that we are best prepared to understand how we can benefit you the most, and hopefully get that product in the hands of our user testers towards winter, end of fall, winter of this year. So we are looking for people. Please sign up on the website. Let us know.
Hyivy.com, which is HYIVY.
Yep, that's it.
.com.
Yeah, and keep a kind of lookout for our pre-sale. Obviously, anyone who participates is going to get, in our user testing is going to get a benefit on that pre-sale and kind of early access to it. But that will be coming out towards spring, summer of next year.
So incredible, Rachel. You know, you are targeting two things you're targeting many things, but two in particular that I'm very passionate about, and I think we don't talk enough about is, the world is like, let's cure cancer. And then it's like, okay, woman, you survived. You're a survivor. Good on you. Have a good life. And the only thing I do hear about is fertility. But for me, it's like, why are we still stuck in the paradigm that a woman's only purpose is to reproduce? What about her lifestyle quality? So I love that you're targeting that. I'm a survivor, but and my life should be not subpar. I want a normal survivor life, right?
Exactly.
And the other part is, and you've said this several times, that I'd love to just like take a minute or two for us to talk about it, is the gender reassignment surgery. So, at FemTech Focus, we are not the last say on what FemTech is defined as, but for us, we define it as women and female health. And so for us, it's queer health, it's transgender health. And so can you tell us a little bit about in what context does your device help an individual with gender reassignment? And then also, did they have any solutions before? Is this the first solution?
Yeah, so such an interesting question. One that I knew about talking to pelvic floor therapists, but didn't know how to address it. And I was pitching in New York, and lo and behold, in this virtual pitch, there was this woman who was just screaming on the other end going, we need to talk, we need to talk. And this wonderful, amazing human, Claire, who is now on our team, who has went through the gender reassignment surgery. So she transitioned from male to female. She's went through all of these issues, and it's so funny because she's like a crazy inventor. And so she actually hacks away at things and has bought all of our competitors' products and have tried to like make this zombie product that would work best for her. But it was so interesting sharing her story and comparing it to mine. Even though we have two completely separate stories, we were dealing with the exact same issues. Wow. And it's like, why, like, what is this? And so, she went as far as even showing pictures and really openly sharing her experience. And she's actually, unfortunately, potentially going back into surgery to just get through. She did everything right and still is dealing with these issues. Yeah. And so, with this comes a lifelong use of dilators. So they are told to use dilators pretty much for the rest of their life. For me, it's up to 5 years after my cancer treatments, but for her, it's a lifelong journey. Yeah. Just to keep that shape and the surgery and everything together, break down that scar tissue and be able to just be a normal functioning woman. It is a very tough space because she has mentioned that majority of women have to go back into 3, 4, 5 different surgeries just to be able to have a semi-normal sex life and urinary function and sensitivity and all of this stuff. So, but once again, very similar to what I had experienced. And I was very shocked. I learned a lot. She has been such a blessing and has really opened us up to understanding a little bit more about how we can help break down those scar tissues, make it a more comfortable experience, and make it a little less invasive in what it really is.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for what you do and being a conscious, forward-thinking leader, and knowing that your product, it's not only the right choice socially, but it's also the right choice in a business mindset to think about what are all the other markets that my product applies to. But I think we're going to get Claire on the show. Would love that. I would love to talk to her. Yeah. Rachel, I'm pretty sure I want to be your best friend. We can talk all day.
Best friends.
Well, we got to wrap this up though. We got 2 last questions that our listeners love. The first one is, a lot of our listeners are aspiring entrepreneurs. What is an area in women's health and wellness that still needs innovating?
Yeah, so I'll make this super quick. And I think I kind of highlighted it a bit. Disease population needs some more attention. We've got a lot of information on our general women's health, and I mean, still needed in that area, but definitely our disease population feels like we've been left out in the dust a little bit.
What do you mean by that? What's disease population?
Yeah, so women experiencing the complications of pelvic health. So endometriosis is something that is like, people still got to go in for surgeries every so often to get everything cleaned out. Like, it's so invasive and we don't know enough about it. PCOS, same thing. It's this complex understanding of our hormones and how our brain talks to the pelvic floor, and all of this stuff is still very unknown. And I mean, we're experiencing that firsthand getting our research. So we need more people there, whether it's research, whether it's diving into your own internal research through a company, people focusing on trying to get our women dealing with complex pelvic issues through to just a normal quality of life. Yes. Aging is a huge one. I mean, that is just something that, even like I said, the doctors had mentioned, we just kind of say they hit an age and like, who cares? But that's not the approach to take. We need more women not afraid to take on hardware, medical, sensors. Like, let's stick some sensors up there, ladies.
Yes.
So I think that is one of the biggest, or a couple of the biggest areas I see.
Wow, incredible. And our last question is, what do you think the FemTech industry as a whole right now needs the most in order to be successful?
Yeah, so I think we need, obviously, I think this, with FemTech comes just the general conversation of women entrepreneurs. We need curious women. We need women who aren't afraid of the unknown. There's a lot, especially in the area of women's health. But at the same time, the unknown comes a lot of opportunity, and opportunity can be scary because it's like you're going out into, they say, the blue ocean. It's this ocean of opportunity and freedom, but at the same time, there's big waves and there's sharks and there's all sorts of things, right? So women who are willing to take the risk to dive in, understand that failure is a good thing. It is. Yes, it's going to come. It's going to happen. Yep. But that can always be transformed into something positive. And us girls just got to put our boots on and, get in the trenches and get in there, and not be afraid to take some hits along the way and take some risks.
Yes. God, Rachel, seriously, best friends. I like all of that. I'm going to call you for a pep talk whenever I need one.
Sounds good.
Rachel, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah,
I really appreciate you.
Yes, likewise. Thank you.